this time, the journey was not one of sorrow, but one of solidarity. The visit breathed new life into our shared commitment to build a new bridge that I call the Atlantic Bridge, one made not of wood and steel, but of people, of partnership, and of purpose. We are now reimagining the Middle Passage, not as a scar, but as a route, not as a memory of bondage, but as a pathway of boldness. The waters that once carried our ancestors away in chains now carry our children's dream, our nation's ambitions, and our shared determination to reunite across the Atlantic in pursuit of sovereignty, prosperity, and dignity. As Prime Minister, I've made it a core foreign policy priority to see Africa and the Caribbean not as two regions with occasional overlaps, but as one extended family with an economic, diplomatic, and developmental destiny that is interlinked. Under my upcoming chairmanship of CARICOM in January of 2026, I intend to lead missions of regional heads of governments back to the African continent. This will not be a courtesy call. It will be a declaration of intent, a commitment to further embed the Caribbean into the architecture of global Africa. And to those who may ask why now, I say because we cannot afford to wait. President Orama has taught us that. Because the world is changing fast. And because in this era of fragmentation, we must become more together, not less. Global supply chains are being redrawn. Financial institutions are recalibrating. Climate change is accelerating. And global equity remains elusive. In such a context, the greatest risk we face is not overreaching, it is retreating. It is remaining isolated. It is failing to connect the dots of our shared power as regions. Afreximbank, under the leadership of President Orama, has understood this better than most, not in words or ideas, but in action. The bank has not merely spoken about Pan-Africanism, it has invested in it. It has operationalized it. It has expanded it beyond continental borders to embrace the Caribbean. And in doing so, it has reminded the world that together, yes, we can.
First of all, we are witnessing a world in transition. Global fragmentation is deepening, protectionist policies are resurging, multilateralism, once the bedrock of global trade is being tested, some might even say eroded. And for a continent whose development prospects are tightly interwoven with global trade and capital flows, these shifts carry profound implications. At the same time, Africa is contending with complex and compounding vulnerabilities such as high, sometimes unsustainable debt burdens, escalating trade, escalating climate volatility, fragile food systems, significant infrastructure gaps, and so on, which are all converging to constrain the continent's room for policy maneuver. However, within this challenging context lies an extraordinary opportunity to reset, to rethink, and to reposition Africa's development trajectory. So it's against this backdrop that we are presenting these flagship publications. I want to also stress here that these reports are not mere compendiums of statistics or conventional commentary. Rather, they are strategic narratives grounded in data and insight, and together they help us to make sense of the world in flux, and more importantly, to chart a course through it. The African Trade and Economic Outlook report for 2025, themed Africa's Resilience in a Changing World Order, offers a forward-looking macroeconomic perspective. It examines key trends in growth, inflation, debt, exchange rate dynamics, and trade performance. It also identifies looming risks and emerging opportunities, providing the analytical depth required for sound policy and investment decisions. On the other hand, the African Trade Report for 2025 focused on African trade in a changing global financial architecture, delves into the structural shifts reshaping global finance and trade. It also explores how capital flows, interest rate regimes, exchange rate volatility, and new payment systems are redefining the way African economies engage with the rest of the world and with themselves. It is in this light, both of these reports serve as more than tools for reflection. They are strategic compasses designed to convert complexity into clarity and insight into action. So they provide policymakers, investors, development actors, and so on with evidence-based options that align Africa's demographic strengths and resource wealth with integrated long-term strategy. They therefore represent roadmaps for navigating this increasingly multipolar and uncertain world and underscore a new phase of African ambition, one where the continent no longer reacts to global developments, but begins to shape them. Let us now drill down into some of the key messages from both reports, starting with the African Trade and Economic Outlook for 2025. The central theme here is that Africa is adapting. Despite a turbulent global environment over the last few years, including the COVID-19 pandemic, commodity price volatility, inflationary pressures, major geopolitical realignments, and increasingly disruptive climate events, Africa has shown and is showing a remarkable ability to adjust, recalibrate, and push forward. Despite a challenging 2024, the continent grew by 3.3%. This represents one of the strongest growth rates in the world. At the same time, Africa's trade rose by 13.9%, with intra-African trade in particular rebounding strongly, growing by 12.4%, thereby reversing the previous year's decline. This performance in 2024 was supported by stronger domestic consumption, rising investment flows, and enhanced trade integration, especially under the AFCFTA.
And so today, as we look to the future through the prism and the lens of the past mission of our founding mothers and fathers, it is clear that they did succeed indeed to push back the colonialists and to ensure that our continent is free. However, the second objective has evaded us for many, many decades, and that is the economic integration of our continent. In the year 2020, the AFCFTA Secretariat was established with a very simple task to advance rapidly on the integration of our continent's economy. The founding mothers and fathers had a vision, a truly continental project built on trade, shared infrastructure, a common sense of economic destiny, industrial development of our continent, and of course, job creation for young Africans. The achievement of establishing the AFCFTA, at least at law, guided by our heads of state's decision of 2012 to significantly boost intra-Africa trade, indeed marked a turning point in our efforts to drive inclusive growth, sustainable development across our continent. And so the AFCFTA is ambitious, not only in scope, but also in the depth of trade and investment liberalization that it seeks to achieve. It demonstrates our leaders' unwavering commitment to take charge of our economic destiny through the implementation of the AFCFTA, and particularly through interventions that are aimed at industrial development in our continent. Today, as we speak, the AFCFTA has been ratified by 49 members of the African Union, the fastest ratification since the establishment of the Organization of African Unity for any instrument, particularly an instrument for economic integration. This rapid ratification demonstrates the political will and commitment of our heads of states to advance on the vision of an integrated economy in Africa. So today we present an investment proposition underpinned by a combined GDP of over 3.4 trillion United States dollars, with a population of 1.4 billion people and potentially the youngest population in the world by the year 2050. This unified market is poised to unlock the dynamism of our entrepreneurs, spur on industrialization, as I mentioned, create millions of jobs, and shift our economies from commodity dependence towards higher value addition and structural transformation. As we make steady progress in the implementation of the AFCFTA, with clear milestones ahead to be achieved, not only should we congratulate ourselves for having made this progress in this short space of time thus far, but we must also recognize the challenges that lie ahead. Let me start with the progress made. The political commitment of our heads of states, as I mentioned, is unprecedented. 49 state parties to the AFCFTA that have collectively accepted the obligations to eliminate and reduce barriers to intra-Africa trade and barriers to intra-Africa investment. Second, tariff reductions and simplified customs systems are taking shape, removing long-standing barriers to trade. Third, commercially meaningful trade is taking place. Businesses are taking advantage of the market presented by the AFCFTA, benefiting from reduced or zero tariffs. In this regard, close to 3,000 certificates of origin have been issued, which means that the private sector, the informal traders, as well as smallholder farmers are taking advantage of this new market. We have concluded and adopted critical protocols that will anchor Africa's economy, which includes the Protocol on Investment, the Protocol on Intellectual Property Rights, which is set to support innovation, the Protocol on Competition Policy to ensure fairness of markets, and most recently we concluded the Protocol on Digital Trade and the Protocol on Women and Youth in Trade.